better than your currency. Splurging millions, buying houses like Monopoly. Fucking 9 to 5, man, the money is a joke to me. Buying cryptocurrency, my money in the privacy. I make it rain dollars, they watch me disappear. I'm so fly, man, I'ma need some landing gear.
Hey guys and girls, welcome to this week's episode of the No BS with Birchy podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Birch, and this is the show unraveling the truth to the facade of the 21st century. We're now exiting the matrix and waking up to motherfucking reality. And today I have a tremendous guest, very, very honoured, very privileged to have Senator Malcolm Roberts with us. So thank you for taking the time out of your day, Senator.
You're welcome, and thank you for the invitation, Nathan. Good to be with you. It's my apologies for being late.
My pleasure, mate. My pleasure. And a lot of my viewers might be wondering, Nathan, for those of them that don't know who you are, everybody needs to know who you are, needs to know what you represent, what you do. And it's a big privilege. I'm so excited for our chat today. Growing up from my side, I grew up in a liberal household, and everyone used to say, "Oh, liberal's good," all that sort of stuff. And as an adult, I've seen how the matrix works, and I see, I used to be on the news. I used to be on TV all the time, and I got invited to the ABC quite a lot, and it was very staged. It was very put up, and I was realizing it was like a Labor attack. And it's like I came to give content and advice on certain things, and I saw that it was twisted into being a political game. And I realized, that when you look at politics, you've got left and right, and everyone's going, "Oh, it's this person, it's that person," but no one's looking at the underlayer. And I think if you've got, I might say things that might make you a bit awkward today, Senator, but I'm just going to say it here. I look, if you've got left and right, and you've got two puppets there, right? I don't want to know about the puppet. I want to know about who's got their hand in the puppet and who the string is and who's the controlling power. And I look at it, and it's like the same people that fund a lot of politics out there funding agendas on TV and different comments that are happening through. And, it's really the reason why I love you so much and what you do and what you stand for is I've been watching you now for a few years, throughout the last 3 years when there've been, medical things that have been put down, and there's people that are paid, are sold, are bought, and the way that you stand for the rights of Australians, and you're fighting for the rights and the truths of people that they don't even realise that are being taken over via, corporations and corporocracy that's controlling what's out there. So you're the real hero that's underrated out there, and I just want to give you the view of what I see and a lot of our community see from what you put out there. Keep fighting the good fight. You're fighting from the belly of the beast. So thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much for your kind words. We just tell the truth. Pauline and I both just tell the truth, and we don't care what people think of us, but we just have to tell the truth, because in the end, the person who I have to report to ultimately is me.
Exactly.
And I can't live with myself if I don't tell the truth.
Yeah. I love if no one's following you, Senator, everyone should be at least following your Instagram page out there to be seeing the content you put out there. And what other sort of areas can people follow you?
Our website is malcolmrobertsqld.com.au. That's Malcolm with 2 L's in it, robertsqld.com.au. I'm on Twitter as mroberts. I think that's it. I don't look at my own Twitter handle. I post a lot on it, but I don't look at it every time. I think it's at capital M, capital R, Roberts. And Facebook is Senator Malcolm Roberts. Yeah. I'm on Telegram, but one of my staff usually takes what I post myself on Facebook and Instagram and puts it on Telegram for me.
Fantastic. And I love your cartoons you're putting out there at the moment. They're tremendous. They're a treat.
Oh, they're Pauline's cartoons.
Yeah. Awesome. So I guess maybe just for a little bit of those that don't know who you are, maybe if you can give us a bit of a background, like what got you into politics and sort of your thoughts and your view on the world and what's been happening, especially the last few years.
Sure. What got me into politics was that I worked in the coal industry. I loved working in the coal industry. I started off as a graduate mining engineer with an honours degree, and then I decided I better go and learn something. So I worked as an underground coalface miner for about 3 years, different companies, different mines. Then I worked overseas. Then I came back to Australia, rose very quickly through management ranks, ran large coal mines underground. I loved the underground. And then I decided to do an MBA at the University of Chicago, did that, and got offered jobs in the States, but I was headhunted back to Australia, set up a very large project. And after 3 years, we had a number of successes. I love doing things for the first time because there's a lot of learning. And so we introduced a lot of new leadership methods and very, very successful, and created a number of records. And then I decided to go and work as a consultant. So I've worked here, overseas, America, Canada, New Zealand, that's right. And then I came back from New Zealand. I had 12 months over in New Zealand. My family went over there, and there was all this talk about global warming. And I know atmospheric gases, and I knew it was complete crap.
Yeah.
And so, but you know, we tended to not value ourselves as much as we should. And so I thought, who's little old me to be able to claim that these scientists, thousands of scientists, and thousands of politicians are telling us what is wrong? And I just did the research and I said, no, damn it, I'm right. And then I started holding politicians accountable for their lies about climate, journalists, academics, various researchers, and no one would debate me. And then I started speaking against the carbon dioxide tax that Julia Gillard brought in. So I got onto the speaking circuit, if you like, not paid, all voluntary for about 8 years. Yeah. And then Pauline Hanson saw me speak, and she said, could I come and speak with her? Did that. She offered me a ticket on the Senate, and I got into the Senate, and away we went. So I'm not a real politician in the sense that I'm not, you know, I grew up in a liberal family as well, so I understood free markets, understood, well, what the Liberals were then anyway. They're not that now. But,
I'd say I'm up until when I met you out there, I would have said I was politically atheist, because it's like you've got a Liberal government which put us in $1 trillion worth of debt. You've got all these different policies that are being put in place that no one questions. Everyone's just a blind faith by what the leaders are putting out there, and it's crazy. But
yeah, both parties, you know, the policies in the Labor Party are almost identical to the policies in the Liberal Party. Slight differences in degree, that's all. Yeah. But there's only one difference between the Labor Party and the Liberal Party now. In the Labor Party, no one speaks up. No one. Because if they speak up against a party view, then they get canned and they won't be pre-selected again. They get ostracized. I mean, it's really severe. In the Liberal Party, that happens generally, but only 2 or 3 of the Liberals will occasionally stand up and cross the floor and speak against it. So they're both parrots. They're both flocks of parrots, flocks of sheep, really.
Yeah. So I've got some really random questions for you, Senator. If they're all parrots and sheep, and you know they're just talking, where do you think the power structure is coming from? What's happened to our political landscape? Like, who's controlling it? Where's the power coming from? Like you're talking about climate change, and we've seen the medical issues that have happened the last few years. We've had, you know, very communist style regimes that have been put in via different type of governments that are out there. You must face medical procedures to, you know, continue your job or whatever. Where's this all come from? Who's like, I don't know if you've got thoughts on it, or you can share that.
I've got thoughts on it. And most people won't share the thoughts I'm about to share with you. And even 13 years ago, before I started doing my research into the climate scam, I would have thought someone saying what I'm about to say was a nutcase, but I know it for a fact now. If you look at the world, the climate fear, the climate alarm was created by one man, Maurice Strong, who's dead now. He's senior operative in the senior bureaucrat in the UN, and he created climate scam, climate fraud. The COVID, I recognized that within a few months. At first, we said, no, we've got to do all these things to look after people, because we saw these pictures of dead people in Italy and China and all the rest of it. And then very quickly, I worked out it was a scam as well. COVID is real, but its severity is low to moderate. And they're the figures. They're not my figures. They're from the chief medical officer, low to moderate. I asked him. And so we turned the whole country upside down because of something that had less severity than a typical flu. I mean, and they're the figures, again, that chief medical officers have told me. The same, COVID was a complete balls up, because it was never about health. It was always about using deceit to control and to transfer wealth. And the wealth transfer went from your pocket, my pocket, to Big Pharma. And the control was to put in place principles and practices for controlling people regardless of what's happened. Now they're talking about the same kind of practices, climate lockdowns in France, climate lockdowns, they're even talking about them in North America.
Yeah.
So it's just about control and wealth transfer. And the people behind that are the same people who pushed the large banks. We got in place the Hayne Royal Commission into Financial Services, which is into banks, insurance companies, etc. We basically pushed that. The previous Liberal government under Turnbull said, no way you'll get that. We got it because we exposed the inhuman practices that the banks were causing in the rural sector. We got the Royal Commission. The Royal Commission unearthed a lot of stuff. Not one senior executive in the banks has gone to jail despite some of the things that they did. Not one of them has paid a fine despite some of the things they did. And so the Liberal Party was about to bring in place a financial accountability regime scheme, and didn't have any fines for the bankers. But they didn't bring that bill into place. The Labor government, after it came in, brought that bill into place. It didn't have any fines for bankers.
Yeah.
So we've called that out. But if you go to the shareholders of the National Australia Bank, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, Vanguard, Norges, State Street, Colonial First State, BlackRock again. Then if you go to the shareholders of the Commonwealth Bank, same group, almost identical. And sorry, this is the major foreigners who own the shares in these companies. We still have mums and dads own them. Westpac Bank, similar. Vanguard Group, Vanguard Investments, BlackRock Fund, State Street, BlackRock Advisors, Australian Foundation, and ANZ, same group. They're the big boys. They're the globalist predators, we call them. They own and control so much of so many companies around the world.
Yeah.
And what happens is they apply the pressure to governments, and they also they appoint directors in this country who appoint executives for the banks, and the executives don't dare do anything other than comply with what BlackRock wants, what State Street want. So they're the ones who are controlling the shots, the big global predators. The globalist predators also control the UN, and a lot of our policies are coming from the UN and the World Economic Forum. For example, on climate, UN 2050 net zero. It's destroying our electricity sector, but that's coming from the UN and the World Economic Forum, which are just vehicles for the major funds, BlackRock, State Street Investment.
And I guess when we look at inflation, they keep blaming inflation. Oh, it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It's China, it's chip shortage, it's this, it's Russia, it's Ukraine, it's all these things. If we look at what's happening, like if you look at electricity prices, look at coal prices, look at the cost of commodities, they're rising continuously because our dollar is being devalued. They just keep printing. And a lot of people think that there's the politicians that are printing the money or whatever the case may be. They're not aware to it. But the $1 trillion worth of debt that we've taken on as a nation, there's an interest bill attached to that. Globally, this is occurring. That's flowing on to, the inflation that's happening out there, like electricity prices up 20%, up another 20%. Every time they go up, any shop that's selling anything, food, any produce is just adding to that inflation, which is very, very interesting. And I was having a little bit of a laugh inside there, Senator, because I've tried to alert people for the last 6-7 years about the BlackRock, the Vanguard, and all that. And originally, 7 years ago, people would write on my YouTube videos, "Get off the drugs, Nathan. You're stupid. That's delusional," right? I've never touched drugs in my life, right? But it sounds stupid, but no one's questioning this stuff. You, as I said, the belly of the beast, you're in there, you're digging through the trenches to try and expose this stuff, which is very, very important that people know. You mentioned about lockdowns. What do you think about potential future climate lockdowns or potential more medical occurring lockdowns? Do you think that we're going to see more of that, or?
Yeah, well, let's just go back a bit for a start. The Federal Reserve Bank in America controls a lot of monetary policy around the world because of its power. It's privately owned. We know that.
When I've been to the RBA.gov website, it doesn't have the Australian government crest of arms. It says it reports to the Australian government and its agencies, which it means that that's not one of them. It looks.
Well, when I first got into the Senate, we have what's known as Senate estimates, which is the hearings where the bureaucrats in each agency and the minister in each agency front a group of senators. And they say before the Senate estimates, who do you want to see appear at the next Senate estimates hearings? Yeah. And so we give our list. And I said, I want the Reserve Bank to appear. Oh, you can't have them. Why not? Oh, they don't come to send estimates. Why not? Oh, they just don't come. And so I said, well, I want them. And then I said, who pays their wages? Oh, the taxpayers. Well, they should be there. And then she went away. The chairman of that committee went away and came back and said a couple of days later, said you can have them either privately in camera next week, or you can have them in the following Senate estimates in 6 months' time. So I went, I'm a new boy here. I don't know what's going on. So let's do it straight away. Yeah. So we had a few senators in there asking questions. And then next Senate estimates, we got them anyway. Then I got knocked out of the Senate with foreign dual citizenship. I was the only one who wasn't a dual citizen, but I didn't do it technically correctly by the time of nomination. So yeah, I was at the time of nomination, that's correct. So anyway, I came back into the Senate and the Reserve Bank was not at Senate estimates. So I said to the finance minister, I want them. You can't have them. We had a discussion in public. They came. So we got them and they've been here ever since. So the Reserve Bank, I won't make any comments about what you just said because I don't know, but as far as I can see, it is a government entity because they do come before us in Senate estimates. But you also talked about electricity prices. Electricity prices are artificially high because of the subsidies to solar and wind. That's the main reason. Secondly, because we've got what's called a national electricity market, which is really a national electricity racket. It's not a free market at all. It's a racket. We've destroyed our electricity sector, and that's why the prices have gone up, but largely because solar and wind. You talked about inflation. That's largely due to the fact that the federal government and the Reserve Bank, the previous federal government and the Reserve Bank, splashed $500 billion in cash. When you add so much cash, and it's free cash, then you drive up the prices because there's so much more cash chasing the same amount of goods. Then when you add to that the fact that the COVID lockdowns suppress the supply of goods, you've got fewer goods with more money. And so more money chasing fewer goods leads to increase in prices. That's where our inflation's come from. Coal prices went up around the world, but that doesn't affect our electricity price in this country, Nathan, because we're a big producer of coal, about number 6, I think. But we produce enough coal for ourselves and export. We're about the second biggest exporter. But the coal use in our power stations in this country are on long-term contracts. So when the prices overseas for coal went up $400 to $400 a tonne, our coal-fired power stations were still only paying 80 to 100. So coal prices did not affect our electricity. It's all due to bullshit policies from the United Nations that Labor and Liberal are both pushing, and also due to inflation in general. So that's why house prices are going up as well. So private companies control the money supply around the world. They control it either directly through the Federal Reserve Bank or they control it through our governments. For example, Stephen Jones, who's the Assistant Treasurer, I think, he's significant. He's the one who brought in this bill that doesn't want fines for major bankers. So I've forgotten your main question, but I had to cover those points.
And I could sit here all day and talk to you about this stuff. It's we don't hear it enough. Like 95% of people, there's a few people that are awake to it and are questioning, but 95% of the population are following by blind faith without questioning and obeying what they're being told. And it's absurd. And you're one of the only people out there that's in the market talking about this from within.
And the only reason I am doing that, excuse me, is I understand about atmospheric gases. So I knew what they were telling us about climate was complete crap. It's fraud. What's going on? It's fear-based to drive people into control. And then I did my research to make sure I was right. When I was right, I then started doing further research saying, okay, who's driving this corruption of science? That was led to the UN. Then when I went further and said, who's driving the UN? Then I found the major banks doing it and the major globalist predators. And they're behind just about everything.
Yeah. And I very similar to you, like I was put in front of the TV a lot and talking about economics and property and investing and whatnot. And I feel like they kept dumbing it down, right? And I give them very good content, and then it suddenly becomes like just a butter, like just a spread of peas that is a fluff piece, right? And I was looking at it, I was like, you're suppressing it. You're suppressing it because of your advertisers. You're suppressing it because of your sponsors. And what you're putting out in the media, when I hear about financial markets, macroeconomics, I'm like, this is all a pile of lies. And then I realized if there's stuff there that's blatant lies. If you look at every script that's put on, you've got teleprompters through the TV. Who's writing that script in there for the presenters, the actors to be talking about? And I realize, like, if there's so many things that I know firsthand, much like yourself with science and you know, the gases and whatnot, if there's so many things that I see that are a lie that you can't push past that, what about things I don't know about? Politics, geopolitical, science, right? Medical. I'm not professing to know about that, but I question it and I look at the certain things that are occurring from a layman's term, like, this doesn't add up. And we're in a world where these things don't add up.
That's right. If you look at the COVID mismanagement,
Yeah.
you know, the government say COVID caused this. Complete rubbish. It was the mismanagement of COVID that caused that. It was the deceit that drove it. If you look at Scott Morrison, the federal government cannot interfere and make mandate make people take shots, right?
Yeah.
So the federal government got the states to do it. And Scott Morrison said there are no vaccine mandates in this country. He said it every night for about 2 weeks. But at the same time, he bought the injections from Pfizer and Moderna and AstraZeneca. He bought them with our money. Yeah. He gave them to the states. He indemnified the states. He gave the states the access to the health department, federal health department data, which they needed, essential for mandating. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to enforce the mandates.
Yeah.
The states actually said that they did the mandates because of the national cabinet, which Scott Morrison formed. It's bogus. It goes against the Constitution. It's bogus. And he was chair of the national cabinet, so-called bogus national cabinet. So he funded it, gave them indemnity, gave them the data, and then he as chair of the national cabinet, he pushed them. Yet that man, and then he also had vaccine injection. They're not vaccines; they're injection mandates in the Defence Department, Australian Electoral Commission, aged care, Australian Federal Police, Customs, and then that man stood up in public on every night for about 2 weeks and said there are no injection mandates in this country. Complete lie.
Disgusting.
And the same with the Labor Party premiers that are largely Labor Party premiers. They were complicit in the whole thing. It was orchestrated from start to end. And we now know, we've pushed this really hard, but we found out that it was available on Defence Department website.
Yeah.
The injections were developed for the United States, not the Health Department, for the United States Department of Defense. We are part of the Medical Countermeasures Consortium, which consists of the military and health officials of the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia. They all pushed this. They signed a contract with Pfizer and indemnified Pfizer, and they pushed this development of countermeasures. They weren't called vaccines at the start; they were countermeasures. We also know that that the federal government of the United States funded in China at Wuhan at their lab, a biolab, what is it called? Gain of function research, which developed COVID. We know that this happened. At first, the governments lied about that. They knew it was true, but they lied about it. And now the people, because we've had a few whistleblowers and quite a bit of work digging it up, we know that the virus was concocted. We know that the virus was never severe. It was moderate to low in severity. And we know that the whole thing was just basically bullshit.
Problem, reaction, solution.
Got it.
Yeah. And I guess the flow-on effect from that, right? Like, I've made sort of comments and sort of joked with this idea beforehand when we look at, like, our nation at the moment, just talking about housing policy and whatnot, right? I believe the numbers, I don't know exactly what they are, but if we go back to the 1990s, the Keating government, they had like $92 billion worth of debt when they left. It took like a decade to pay that out, but the debt that's been incurred in the last year or the last government that was in place has been about 10 times that amount. The country is full of debt. People aren't questioning the debt that we have. How do we pay that debt? We need more taxpayers. We need more, people to pay that. We've opened up our doors for migration. I've noticed that Costello's forecast of 90,000 population increase per year, that's now 700,000 over the 18-month period that we're in. Where are they going to go? What's that going to mean? Why are they here? Is it because of paying off our debt, so we need more population? What's that going to do to housing affordability? What's that going to do to the cost of living? Is the question I've got as well, just a random one.
Okay. Why is it being done? You're absolutely correct about the immigration numbers. It's absurd. It's inhuman because of the consequences it'll have on low income families. I saw some figures from one of my staff, a young fellow. He's just developed. I've forgotten where he got the figures from, but they break the Australian population into quintiles: 20%, the lowest 20%, the next 20%, the next 20%, and the highest 20%. Okay, so the people who are in the lowest income 20% of this country are paying it's gone from 40% of their income on housing to now paying 65% on housing. Where do they get the money for the energy? Where do they get the money for electricity? Where do they get the money for eating? Where do they get the money for putting a bit away for their future? Where do they get the money to look after their children? It's not there, and it's all artificial. The problem. So what's happened is that we've imported a lot of people, and that's driven up the demand for housing, which has driven up rents and driven up the cost of housing and driven up the price of housing and also the rental. Now, what happens then is that why is the government increasing immigration? Well, it's really simple. But all governments want to avoid being lumbered with the tag that they caused a recession or the recession came in their watch. So what the governments are doing, we would be in recession now if it wasn't for high immigration. High immigration, people come down and they spend more money, which raises our gross domestic product. So recession is 2 quarters in a row of negative growth in GDP. So if you bring more people in, they spend the money, they lift the GDP. But on a per capita basis, on a per person basis, we have been and are in recession.
100%.
So what they're bringing in, these huge numbers of people, purely to avoid a technical definition of recession. They don't give a damn about how many people it hurts, what happens to housing prices, what happens to infrastructure, where kids are going to go to school, where kids are going to get treated when they get sick. So they don't care about the lack of infrastructure and the overcrowding on roads. So what we normally have is about 70,000 people leave every year, roughly, okay? Yeah. What we're saying is that we want net immigration to be zero. In other words, if 70,000 leave, then we allow 70,000 in until we catch up with their infrastructure and their services. Yeah. And what the government is doing is that they used to bring in before COVID about 250,000 a year, which is a hell of a lot of people. Yeah. During COVID, they wouldn't even let Australians come in. No. Right. Now, the Labor Party's gone straight to 400,000 in the first 12 months. 400,000 people on our population is huge.
Yeah.
And where are they going to sleep? Where are you going to find them a bed? Where are you going to find them a roof? So that drives up the demand for housing, which drives up the prices of housing. Add to that inflation, that drives up the cost of housing materials. Add to that the stupid energy restrictions, and the cost of energy to build housing materials increases. Add to that the restrictions that the Greens and Labor Party are putting on timber, forestry. You increase the housing cost, the cost of timber. So this, and then the other thing is we've got so many foreigners owning housing in this country. Yeah, we're not allowed to own houses in China, for example. Many countries won't let foreigners own houses, but China prevents us from owning houses there. But so many Chinese people are owning houses in this country, and some of them are locking it up. They're just not using it. So it's taken off the market, so which reduces the supply of houses. That's why you've got a huge demand and you've got a shortage of supply. That's why the prices of housing and rentals are up.
And I guess when we compound that with the fact of building a new property, so we need to build new properties, the inflation's already hit the bricks, the copper, the everything, the labor that's going to fit into the house. And you mentioned that that it'll affect the bottom quintile or quartile of population. When it affects the bottom part of the population, it's taken 60% of the household income. How do we get around it? I guess that introduces the opportunity for them to put universal basic income and a whole pile more stimmy checks in place where if you comply, you get a bit of support from the government, which will create even further inflation, which no one talks about the inflation coming from the money that's being printed and all the stimmy checks out there.
So if you own a house, you probably do, but if you own an investment property, say then someone says to you, Nathan, we're going to bring in price controls. That's what the Greens have said, and the Labor Party sort of agreeing.
Yeah.
Price cut. The moment you have investors saying, hell, my rent's going to be frozen, what are they going to do? Of course. I mean, it doesn't take any rocket science to work that out. So they've raised, so we've already seen rentals increase because the dopey Greens are pushing for rental caps. When you have other controls being pushed on rental property owners, the investors, then they say, hang on, how's this going to affect me? They take their they either increase the rental price for those, you know, like if you say if the government says to you as an owner, we're going to say you cannot control what people put on the walls of their houses, pictures, etc., what modifications they make, then you're going to say, hell, that's going to cost me more money to fix up later on. So you're going to raise the rentals, or you're going to say, to hell with this, take it off the market. And that's what people are doing.
Supply and demand. Supply and demand is less there for it.
Or you're going to go into bed and breakfast, which reduces the supply, you know, B&B. You're going to reduce the supply of housing. So that'll increase the prices further. Whenever a government interferes, it wrecks things. Every single monopoly anywhere in the world is driven by a government that created that monopoly. Every monopoly. What we've got to do is get government out. We've got to stop the foreign ownership of housing in this country. We've got to free up the marketplace for housing so that we don't control it. The Albanese government is now wanting to put in place 3 additional bureaucracies to manage housing construction. They put in what they say is $10 billion in the future fund for housing. It's complete bullshit, because what they're doing is they're investing $10 billion in the future fund, but they're only spending on housing. The return on investment from that, so it might only be $300 million a year. You're not going to build many houses. Then if you look at their figures, they're saying we're going to build, what was the number? But it works out when you divide the money that they've allocated with the number of houses, it works out at $80,000 per house. What sort of house are you going to get for $80,000?
They're building granny flats now for $200 for a granny flat. It's crazy.
So I mean, it's just lies. And then they're wanting to increase energy prices because, well, they don't want to increase energy prices, but they'd rather increase energy prices as a result of solar and wind than tell the truth and stop following UN policies on solar and wind, which every country in the world that's increased solar and wind has increased electricity prices. We've gone from being the lowest electricity prices in the world to amongst the highest. So this is all government created, and the government is now telling us lies about the solution. What we need to do is stop foreign ownership and get out of the way and let the tradies build more damn houses.
Yeah, exactly. It's I feel like the whole thing is a Ponzi scheme. The whole thing, they've got to cook the books to try and figure. They've got books to account for, and they're cooking the books over here, but leaving the information in off-balance sheet transactions.
And we're the only ones with the courage to say the number one problem is high immigration, excess immigration. We've got no problem with immigrants, none at all. But if you bring in 400,000 people in 1 year, where are you going to find the beds? Where are you going to find the roof over their heads? You've got to cut immigration back to net zero, which means if you lose 70,000 a year, you bring in 70,000. You don't bring in 700,000.
I look at it as you're just saying that. Like, I just went for a trip all around Queensland. Actually, I spent 7 weeks driving. Went from Sydney to Cape York and all the way through inland, checking out some of my assets in the mining region, actually. And one thing I realised, just to put in perspective for the viewers of what 400,000 population is, I believe Townsville's about 200,000 population, the largest regional town in Queensland, biggest regional city in Queensland, double the size of Townsville every year coming in. The size of between Brisbane and Tweed Heads, the Gold Coast section, is about 500,000. So about the size of the whole Gold Coast, dropping it in Australia every year is the sort of numbers that we're talking about. And then the compounding effect, we can't physically print as many houses as they are printing the money. The inflation is too crazy. I'm very respectful of your time, Senator. I do have a couple of questions just about your thoughts of inflation and if you think they'll ever get under control and if we're going to head for a hyperinflation, and also talking about your thoughts on a digital currency and what will happen with the collapse of our currency that we currently have, if you have any insight on that you could share.
Okay, I don't make forecasts because very few people can make forecasts, but
sure.
With inflation, I can't tell if we're going to get hyperinflation, but I do know that we can get it under control. Inflation has come about always because of government policies throughout history, and always someone else has come into power and brought it under control.
Yeah.
This case, the Liberals caused the inflation, the Liberal National Party caused the inflation, and Labor is making it worse because of their energy policies. So yes, inflation can be fixed. No doubt about it. It's been done repeatedly. And secondly, will these turkeys do it? I don't think they will. So we might see it continue for a while, but I don't make predictions. The digital currency, no, don't want it, because what they're setting us up for is a social credit system, where they eventually control how much money you get and how much money you can spend based upon what you say and what you do or don't do, what your behaviors. For example, if you've got an SUV car, then you might not get a housing loan. It's that simple. The banks are already doing it. Commonwealth Bank's already starting to do it. They're wanting to control and reduce our cash because the banks are already cutting ATMs savagely. They're cutting the number of ATMs. They're cutting the number of bank branches. They're trying to make it easy to do things electronically. They want us to find the convenience, and then this is their plan, to just cut us off altogether and from cash. And then we got a central bank digital currency, and then they control what we spend and how we spend it and what we spend it on.
Yeah. Crazy time.
But keep using cash.
I always tell everyone
cash.
To use cash. Be mindful of every time you upgrade your app. You said about the CommBank. I actually did a podcast on that recently, or a Facebook Live, about the CBA had put the social credit score inside of there and the amount of carbon footprint that you've got, and they're trialing that. And put in there, I forget the links, but there's actually the digital identity that's coming from that. Each bank's upgrading their software actually had a link to an external party which controls all the identity. So each bank's got connected to this one entity which controls the ID that's going into it and all the identity.
So what we've seen with COVID, we've seen fear used. What these globalist predators do, these parasitic globalist predators do, is they use fear and they use convenience. And so when the Reserve Bank when the Federal Reserve Bank was brought into place in America, the Americans did not want a privately owned central bank.
Yeah.
They got it. They snuck it in when the politicians in Congress were on Christmas recess. Many of them had already left early for Christmas
Woodrow
recess.
Wilson. Yeah.
Sorry?
Woodrow Wilson in 1913.
Yes. What they'd been pumping at, they created a severe recession. They stole a lot of they foreclosed a lot of farmers. Remember back then, 40% of the people were farmers. They foreclosed on a lot of the loans. They squashed that. Then they put in place the Federal Reserve legislation saying that because of the cycles in business, they needed something to take the cycles out. They blamed the cycles in business on the fact that we didn't have a central bank. Yeah. So that created a central bank. What they didn't tell you was that it was all artificially created, and we've had worse cycles since then because the Federal Reserve Bank has been abysmal at doing what it's supposed to do. So that's the first thing. So the second thing is they use fear. They also use convenience. So they make it easy for doing things and lull people into a false sense of confidence, so they just give up. And then they also bring in limits like what we're facing now, censorship laws, the misinformation, disinformation laws, where the government can say whatever it wants. And the biggest misinformer and disinformer of the last 3 years was the federal and state governments. Without a doubt, they told us lies everywhere. So they're saying, but they're going to shut you down if you have a podcast from disinformation and misinformation, and that's purely censorship. And when they have censorship, then they can control what you say and what you can't say, and then you can't react to we couldn't have this conversation.
Exactly. The control it's insane. The control level that's out there. I see that they're taking away the ATMs, on and off ramps to be able to access cash. And I look at with the interest rates that we've got, like 10 basis points. We had interest rate at 10 basis points for a very long period of time. The interest rate had not gone up for a period of a decade. It had come down from 2010 to 2020. And then we've been sitting at this zero interest rate policy pretty much. We've now seen the cash rate go up from 10 basis points to 410 basis points. And I saw Costello said on a podcast recently that that the debt that the nation's taken on used to be acceptable at a 10 basis point because it's $1 billion a year, but now it's gone up 4,000 times, 4,000%, sorry, 40 times higher. The debt, the cost of debt, if it was to be rolled over today, would be $40 billion a year just in interest that would be paying as a nation. And that's scary because now they've got control. The central banks have now got control of the governments because they're hooked on this cheap credit.
That's right. Well, interest payments on our loans is going to be one of the biggest categories of our budget, which makes less money available for other things that are really needed.
Yeah.
It's completely mismanaged.
What do you think the solution is?
Solution is to, first of all, tell the truth in government. The number one problem in our country is shoddy governance.
Yeah.
The number one problem of shoddy governance is that they don't make decisions, policies, legislation on data. They go against the data. They contradict the data. Climate policies, complete bullshit. COVID policies, complete bullshit. Complete exaggerations. And so many of the policies, water policies, complete bullshit. Water is fundamental to our food production. We have now got water in foreign companies' hands in our country, depriving it of our farmers and charging an arm and a leg for farmers to get water. How did that happen? Well, that happened by the same man who destroyed the national electricity market, and that was John Howard's government. Yep. That same person brought in a renewable energy target, John Howard's government. Same person had the same government stole farmers' property rights. That was the John Howard government. Stole the rights to use their property. Yeah. All to comply with the UN. All of those things were done to comply with the UN's climate policies.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it looks like this isn't just something that's happened overnight. Like a lot of people are waking up in 2020 to 2023, right? But they think, oh, this has happened now. This is decades. This is hundreds of years. This is decades in our country, which have been slow changes, right? The avatar of the prime minister may change, but it's the policies and the control that's behind it that I see that we're talking about here. Yeah, like it's yeah.
That's right. So the answer to your first question, you're correct. I agree with you on that. The answer to your question is we need to make decisions and policies based on data. The second thing is we need to get the government the hell out of just about everything.
Yeah.
And now I used to be in favor of governments out of everything. I now can see that you can't have a private sector monopoly. For example, roads, water supply. You can't have a private sector control of those monopolies like ports and so on. The privatization has been a complete balls up. What we need to do is get governments reduced, get them right out of the show. Apart from owning public infrastructure like electricity supply, and even then we have a marketplace in governance, because the way our country was set up, the Constitution says that it is based upon competitive federalism, meaning each state runs itself. The states are sovereign entities; they can run themselves. And then if one state does well, people move to that state. Business moves to that state. If one state does badly, people leave that state. So you have a marketplace in governance that way. That's the way the Americans set up themselves as a competitive federalism. That's why we copied that, because it really worked. But what's happened is more and more power has gone to the central government. So we also need to look at things like taxation, because we're getting taxed to death. Now, taxation is necessary. It pays for the cost of government. But it's now gone over the top. We don't have foreign companies in this country paying their share of company tax. That's been the case since 1953. So when they don't pay their share of company tax, we have to pay more as citizens and families. We have to pay more income tax. So we've got to fix it. And then we've got to fix the tax structure. And then you also see the federal government raises the money. It was meant to be the states.
Yeah.
That's a breach of the Constitution. The federal government raises the money. The state governments have the power and to where to spend it. And the local governments now have the problems. The state governments, they're not local governments, they're local councils. But so what we need to do is get the money raising at the same place as the money spending, because then you have accountability. At the moment, if there's a problem in this country, the states blame the federal government blames the states, and they all get away with it. And meanwhile, the local councils have all the problems. So what we've got to do is align that accountability. And the other thing we have to do is stop letting the United Nations run our country. I didn't vote for them. I didn't elect them. No one in this country did. Quite often, there are some UN policies that come into our country that just go through a committee, and just get ticked and flicked, and then they're put in place in law in this country. We need to get back our sovereignty. We need to get back to good governance. Get government shrunk. We need to sort out the taxation system so that it's fair and equitable and efficient. There's some of the basics.
I've got one last question as well. I've never actually spoken about it out there. The voice, right? What could you share with us about the voice? Someone told me about it and they said, what are your thoughts? I was like, what is this thing? I'd never heard about it. I looked into it and I was like, I got my thoughts on it, but I'd love to hear it from you first before I say what my thoughts on that as well.
Well, I could talk for half an hour on this. The voice is an absolute tragedy if it gets up. It's a shocking thing for this country. It's again on behalf of the globalists. There's a Native Title Act which came in 1992, 93, somewhere around there. And people in the cities think, oh yes, we've given the Aboriginals back their land under native title. Bullshit. Yeah. What we've done is we've taken the land, and by the way, the words United Nations are littered through the preamble to the Native Title Act. What we've done is followed UN policy. UN policy is to take land off you and take land off me and off every person and have it for the government to keep. So what they did was they took land off people, then they locked it up. Yeah. The biggest problem right across the north of this country, and I've been through all the Aboriginal communities on Cape York, for example. I've been to several in the Northern Territory. I've been through the ones in Cape York and Torres Strait Islanders two or three times each. So I've got a feeling for the problems. The number one problem that the Aboriginals talk about in their communities is the inability to get a block of land so they can build a house or have a small business loan, right? They just can't get it. So we didn't give them the land. We stole the land from everyone else and locked it up. That's the first thing. Yeah. The second thing about so that wasn't to help them. It was to steal the land from everyone and not make it available to Aboriginals. So it's not about the Aboriginals. The second thing is that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders Commission in 1990s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s was rife with corruption. Yeah. They were an Aboriginal body that was put in place by legislation supposedly to look after the Aboriginals. Yeah. Full of corruption, and eventually it was removed. Yeah. Now, that was removed because it's legislation that can be repealed. You can't do that in the Constitution. It's almost impossible to remove once it's in the Constitution. So what the black and white, it's not just Aboriginals who are in the Aboriginal industry. The Aboriginal industry consists of whites and blacks, activists, academics, consultants, lawyers, bureaucrats, politicians. They're the ones who are spending this $35 billion a year. The people on the ground in the communities, in the Aboriginal communities, get very, very little. It's just an Aboriginal industry that feeds off keeping Aboriginals in poverty. Now, we've heard of the Close the Gap. Yeah. It's bullshit. Every year, the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition get up and talk about what they've done. They haven't fixed it at all. Yeah. And so what I've asked the communities, the Cape York communities, what about this Close the Gap? And they go, what? Or they tell me it's just useless. One councillor up in Bardu Island and Torres Strait Islanders, he just had the courage to say, look, Malcolm, the Close the Gap campaign will run out of money if they close the gap. The people who are pushing the Close the Gap want to keep the gap there so they can keep getting their money off the federal government. The people on the ground in the Aboriginal communities are not getting it. The biggest destroyer of Aboriginal communities is the Aboriginal industry, white and black activists, lawyers, consultants, bureaucrats, etc. That's the problem. So the voice is a way of entrenching that in perpetuity in the Constitution. So unlike ATSIC, which was abolished, you won't be able to abolish the voice. The second thing is that the voice is going to be very, very damaging to Aboriginals. The second thing is that the voice has got no structure to it. So at the moment, people don't realize our Constitution is the only Constitution anywhere in the world that the people voted on. Yeah. The people voted on. It's a people's Constitution. Yeah. It was formed in 1901. So, sorry, just before 1901. Yeah. Put in place in 1901. under this situation here, the voice is a very dreamy, ill-defined thing. No one's got any details on the voice. They just want us to pass it, and then the government will put in place legislation to shore up the details. That's like giving the government an open check and destroying it. It won't be a people's constitution anymore. It'll be a politician's constitution, and we need less power, not more. The third thing I'd say about the voice is that it's going to be rife with corruption because of ATSIC, and this will have even less accountability, so it'll be even worse than ATSIC, which was abolished. But the third thing about it really is that it leads the way to a treaty. Now, the Prime Minister has been lying and holding back and hiding information. When he's talking in the cities, he says, no, that it's just about the voice, and it's wonderful, give the people a voice. When he goes to the Aboriginal communities, and you listen to some of the people who are pushing the voice, some of the leading designers of the voice, they're saying it's all about treaty. There's the UN coming in again, because the UN will control our country and our sovereignty. That's what it is all about. They have said that. The Aboriginal activists have said that. Some of the white activists have said it. They've admitted that it's all about treaty, which is for the foreign entities like the UN to get control of our country. That's what it's really about.
My layman's term of it, Senator, was I think it's a push to put the foot in the door and have an open checkbook, basically, to be able to install corporate entities inside our constitution, which you can't do unless you put something like this through. That was my layman's view of it. So
correct.
Thank you.
Correct.
You for
and senior people in the Voice campaign have admitted that and have said it until they were talking in audiences were fairly closed. Now we're starting to see those videos come out and be shared, and we've exposed them. So that's what it's all about. I could talk longer on the Voice, but it is insidious. If anyone who values our country must say no.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate all
You're
your
welcome.
time today. A lot of insight there. I could talk all day, but I'm really respectful of the fact that you've got Parliament to go to and different things throughout your day. So thank you. Thank you for your time today, Senator. Really appreciate it. Keep fighting the good fight. The world needs a lot more people like you. There's not enough people that are like you today and fighting the good fight, because it's all about people's freedom and personal liberty and freedom out there, and people don't realize they're getting it stolen every day of the week, and they're believing with blind faith the controlling entities, use them as controlling entities, and using the avatar of the actor that's there, like at the moment or beforehand, that's enacting these things. So thank you for fighting that fight.
You're welcome. And I just want to finish up with this sincerely. The mouthpiece media, the globalists control that. The people who own Pfizer, the people who own the major corporations around the world own a lot of the mouthpiece media, the big brother media. So people are starting to wake up. One of the blessings of COVID mismanagement has been that people have realized it was done deliberately to control people. So they're no longer trusting the mouthpiece media, and that means they're turning to more people like yourself, independent podcasts, what I call truth-seeking, freedom-loving, independent people's media. Keep going. We've got to get the voice. We've got to get the truth out to people. So keep going.
Critical thinking, and there's a lot more of that, I feel, but not enough. It's too late, but at least it's a start, and we just got to keep pushing forward. So
keep doing what you're doing. It's growing. That the number of people who are waking up and making an effort for their country is increasing. It's gone from probably 5% 4 years ago to around about 15%. We need it to get to 30, then we'll start seeing some shifts.
To have a revolution, you need a strong, charismatic leader that can lead that, and it'll arrive. But like, I find it very restoring humanity, seeing the stuff that you guys are putting out there, your party and specifically yourself, Senator, the commentary that you're putting out there, sharing, because no one else is talking about, like I'm sure you had a lot of adversity over the fact of saying it as it is.
When we get criticized and attacked, we just say, we're right on target. So we love it. We love it when that comes.
No one fights. I thought about this recently, right? Like, it's like when someone tries to attack you, it's like no one has to fight unless you've hurt a sore point, or unless you've done any damage, right? It doesn't happen. So when you see that, it's
someone calls me, a label, gives me a derogatory label. I just say labels are the refuge of the ignorant, the incompetent, the dishonest, and the fearful. So if you had an argument and you had data and facts to match my argument, you would present it. But instead, you don't. You come at me with a label like a conspiracy theorist or a COVID denier or a anti-vaxxer or something like that. The moment someone uses a label, I say, thank you, you've just told me I've won the argument.
Yeah. Critical thinking isn't so common nowadays. Having your own mind isn't a thing. So yeah, thank you.
What's more important, I think, is not only is critical thinking left, but the few people who can think critically, many of them are suppressed into silence, so they don't speak critically.
Yeah, exactly. So, and on that note, Senator, how can people join the fight and help you and with your with the journey of being able to bring
Number one, vote.
Yeah.
Vote for the minor parties, particularly ours, because the Liberal and Labor are identical. They pretend to be different, but they're not. Number two is volunteer at election times and help us to get our word out around whether it's letterbox dropping or whether it's being a scrutineer, whether it's handing out how to vote cards at elections, pre-poll especially. Number three, just go around telling people, sharing the information. If you've seen some of my videos, share my videos so that more people wake up, get involved and get into discussions with family members, with workmates, with social friends. Don't just put up with the same old crap that gets accepted just because someone's got a loud mouth. Respectfully, just say you disagree and tell them why you disagree. Spread the word.
Yeah, and keep researching, keep understanding the facts. You said beforehand, BlackRock, maybe a bit of a homework for everyone listening today. Go on to Yahoo Finance or whatever, look at every single company on the ASX 200 or any of the stock markets out there and see who the largest top 5 shareholders are and see the common denominator that's out there. That's a good starting point as well.
Sometimes BlackRock, though, and Vanguard and State Street are hidden behind, what do they call them? Proxies.
Yeah.
They're hiding behind them, so you don't actually see them.
Yeah, one could only assume. Could only assume that's there. So awesome. Thank you, Senator. Really appreciate you coming on today, spending your time with us. Make sure if you haven't been following Senator Malcolm Roberts to go and find him on his social media outlets. He puts out lots of great content and lots of information there for you to be able to share with your friends and family. So thank you again. And thanks to everyone for watching the No BS with Birchy podcast. You can find us on Google Play, Apple Play, Spotify. And if you have any questions or anything, you can reach out to our office, not about political stuff, but about investing and stuff. So hit us up at B.Invested.com.au. Thanks, guys.
Like Bilal said, man, we stuck in the matrix. This my advice, don't care if you take it. The dollar about to die, soon to be hyperinflated. This my 2 cents, don't care if you save it. Join be decentralized and you will see you been lied to the whole time, and it's the irony, cause they do the exact opposite. You become a slave to the system, enough your money, all they do is profit. There's no conspiracy theory, you better hear me. Crypto will set you free before the system does. I don't care if you do or you don't, but what I'm saying is the truth to the reason you choke. I've never been a failure, excuse my behavior. Keep talking, haters doing me a favor. They all tell lies, I know what they been telling you. I'm the opposite, the Donald Trump of Australia. It's amazing, here for the taking. My time is never